The report is amazing. It clearly and coherently looks at each of the issues in turn facing the industry and comes to a reasoned conclusion. And that conclusion supports everything our campaign has been saying. British musicians are suffering needlessly, and the future of British music is in jeopardy because of the way that the economics of streaming are working presently.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but you're the singer and the guitarist of a Mercury Prize-winning band. One might be forgiven for thinking that you're raking it in terms of streaming. Just tell us how much you reckon you make in about a year in terms of streaming revenue.
Approximately a few £100, maybe. Very, very little. You know, I'd rather not be here. I'd rather be writing songs rather than having a scrap with a bunch of multinational corporations about how much money they keep in their pockets. I mean, that's really the funny thing. Streaming is this brilliant thing. It's wonderful. It gives us all the ability to have all of music in our back pocket. I love it as a music lover. I think it's the most incredible service to have ever. But unfortunately, your viewers, who I'm sure are fellow music lovers, their subscriptions are going into the back pockets of a very few number of multinational corporations. And that's the situation of the £10 that you maybe pay for music every month.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look,
less than £1 might get to musicians.
That's interesting. So less than £1 in, let's say, a £10 subscription fee.
Yeah, it could easily be that. I mean, it's really incredibly low. I was talking to my friend. I remember talking to Ian Brodie a couple of years ago. We've all been singing Three Lions an awful lot recently, and I was talking to him a couple of years ago. And when that song was #1 during the 2018 World Cup, I think he said that it made him about £6,000 or £7,000. Now, people like me and Ian don't need to make more money. We've done very well with our careers, but the problem here is, if we're going to say to young people who love music and want to make music and want to have a career, that if what they're aiming for at the absolute top of their career, the apex of getting a #1, means the equivalent of £6,000 in their pocket, I'm sure you can see that there's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, enormously, in terms of trying to get more people into the industry, absolutely. What about the consumer? Because, of course, we've all got used to paying, as you said, around £10 for our Spotify account or any other streaming service. Is there a way of consumers still getting those low prices, or are they going to have to get used to paying more in order to reward artists fairly?
In the first instance, I don't think that consumers are going to have to pay for it. You know, too much of the money. Look, you've got Universal Music, the biggest record company in the world, made $1 billion of profit last year. Whereas the average musician earns something around £20,000 a year. And that income is usually, at least in part, teaching or other associated things. So, you know, that shows you the problem that we have. Warner Music, 6 of their top executives last year paid themselves a stock bonus of $593 million. 6 people.
To what? I just want to ask you on that. Is this then a problem more of those big music companies, those big record labels, or is it a problem of streaming services, or is it the contractual arrangements that they have between the two? Where does the problem lie?
It's actually all three, and that's why this report calls for a complete reset. The contracts which artists have with labels haven't really come on significantly since the 20th century, when labels had very high costs for distribution and manufacturing and scouting around the country. Now those costs are gone, and yet the money the margin that has grown is not being passed on to the artist, it's just going into profits. The streaming services have kept the prices down for 12 years, which is, you know, with inflation, has driven down the price of music by 25% alone. And then when you talk about the deals between the streaming services and the labels, well, artists aren't even allowed to see them. They're protected by what are known as NDAs. So artists can't even find out really what they're earning.
NDAs being non-disclosure agreements, of course. Listen, I want to ask you one last question before we have to let you go, but how much has the pandemic brought this crisis into focus, given that all live music events were stopped for a certain amount of time?
Enormously. You know, I started the Broken Record campaign in April of last year, specifically because I realized that musicians were about to lose almost all of their income, and streaming was left alone. Recorded music streaming was left, and it provides little or no income to almost any musician. It's certainly the sort of, I hate to use the word middle class, but a sort of middle tier of musician who are professional, whose names you probably know and love. They're not getting paid. And people who are already successful are not getting paid. I mean, my campaign is supported by the likes of Paul McCartney, Kate Bush, the Rolling Stones, Kano. The list goes on and on and on. So, you know, this isn't musicians who haven't had a little success saying there's a problem here. This is everybody.